Their diet is heavily about fish that they catch, rice, coconuts, and yams that they grow, and some beef and pork that they tend themselves outside their tumble-down homes. These are plentiful. No one there is undernourished or sick-looking. On the contrary, they haven't got much. They've got some. But they've got enough. And here's the remarkable thing. Though they seem to us to have damn near nothing, it's reported by many sources that measure such things that Vanuatuans are among the happiest people on earth. I'll say it again, the happiest people on earth. This isn't out of ignorance brought on by isolation. The global media is there. They've got cell networks, cable TV, radio, broadband. Hey, they know what's out there in the world. They're just happy with their lot. Some is indeed good, it seems. So score one for my friend James Perry. Some is good. There is a certain natural law in having less, by which I mean a law of nature. Get this. In the center of Port Villa, by the docks, there's a daily market that teems with the excess food that the Nevans grow. The soil is volcanic and thus insanely fertile, hence the excess crop. On our first day, we went there to pick up a few, lunchy things to keep in the tiny fridge we had. They have these bananas there, tiny things about, imagine the size of a tradesman's thumb. And they come in bunches of like 2 dozen for about a lousy buck. I bought them, but I wasn't expecting much. Till I ate one. Imagine a firm but yielding cheesecake-like flesh that tastes not of banana, but of vanilla dipped in honey. No trace of that universal standard banana flavor we're used to. They are a kind of explosive ambrosia, and so tiny, and so cheap. A good thing in a small package. And this reminded me of the theory that's called the quantum, which says that everything in the universe has a given fixed quality or value. Making it larger, or having more of it, reduces the quality of the thing. So in theory, there's a set amount of banana-y goodness prescribed by the banana's DNA. The big, fat, stonking, great ones we buy at Kohl's are, by comparison, almost distastefully bland. For the quantum, the value, has been diluted. This is perhaps why the organic produce you find in shops is in general smaller than its non-organic equivalent. Organic chickens may seem to us like the flat-chested cousins of the Mae West-breasted chooks at Kohl's, which are bigger, yes, but less good and, less good for you. Some is good, and therefore more is better, we naturally think. A significant part of the world economy is founded on value-adding what nature gives us. Take corn, for example. The corn the Native Americans originally ate and cultivated, you wouldn't touch today. It was a small, weedy, straggly stem of long grass with a few measly kernels on top. Even so, if you were to unwind the DNA of that corn, the DNA, when unwound, would be over a mile long. Over generations, the corn was crossbred and fertilized to increase the yield, and then the corn grew somewhat larger. Still nothing like what we've got today. But in the 1970s, the Monsanto Corporation, I think it was Monsanto, it might have been Archer Daniels Midland or one of those other big corn firms, patented an enzyme that chopped that mile of DNA into 1 trillion discrete blobs of fructose. Now the corn, when grown, is a foot-long, buttery, carb-laden phallus. A few years later, after the corn had worked its way into the U.S. food chain as a cheaply produced and massively yielding sweetener, ba-boom! An entire nation becomes morbidly obese in a generation, with all the health-related issues, hypoglycemia, diabetes, having to book 2 airline seats for 1 person. The body simply can't process the quantity of fructose that's been inserted into the corn. It turns it straight into blubber. So more is not actually more. More is actually less. Sorry, James. Who said Addition means increase. To me, it looks more and more like dilution. Once you exceed a thing's quantum, you get diminishing returns, less gross domestic happiness. I mean, there's a right amount of water to add to cordial. Too little and the quantum overwhelms you. Too much, and you get kind of tepid, cloudy water. Did human beings ever know when enough happens? If we did once, we've forgotten it, and the earth groans from the consequences of our forgetting how to make this vital choice. In a world of endless material choice, where do we go, to whom do we go for wisdom about what to choose, about what is in our best interests, about how much we should take, or for that matter, how much we should rightly do? We also want more and more work out of people these days. The bottom line, firmly ensconced as the only measure of value. Who said more work is better work? I, for one, am teaching less now, but my hand to God, I'm doing it better as a direct result of not having my schedule choked with lots of administrative responsibilities. Now, I know this is not the case for most full-time employees. Rates of burnout skyrocket. Rates of addiction climb as people look for ways to cope with having to produce more and more so that they and the owners of their businesses can consume more and more. What is the right quantum of work? Maybe Marx had a point. From each according to his abilities, to each according to his needs. We want, not need, but we want more of everything, blind to the plain fact that more does not satisfy. So, since more doesn't satisfy, we seek the too much to try to jumpstart the results we're meant to get from having more. In the logic of the myth of the endless production and consumption cycle, too much is never enough. Too much doesn't actually exist in the current logic. Sorry again, James, but you were only 1/3 right. Some is good. More isn't better. Too much is too much. And so I return to the Nevans in Vanuatu, in harmony seemingly with what nature gives, and thus happy. Things like tradition, family, the teeming sea and the food it provides, laughter at sunset, and, oh yes, kava. Like most banana republics, Vanuatu is appallingly governed. In an effort to engage with the global economy, the Vanuatu government seems to have drunk the capitalist Kool-Aid, and if you look very carefully at Vanuatu's microcosmic society, you can see this, because quietly, very quietly, the Chinese have come in and bought up all the supermarkets, the petrol stations, the convenience stores, and the cheap shops. They're enterprising, and they provide cheap and plentiful Chinese imports to the Nevans who are only too happy to buy them. Since they're not yet assimilating, they form a kind of thin bourgeois class of shop owners and property owners, and their political influence in Vanuatu is growing. Now, I have nothing against the Chinese by virtue of their Chineseness. This isn't a racial comment. It's simply that we are in a time when the nation of China is becoming, or it already is, the world hegemonic power. For proof of this, you need only look at who Barack Obama would and wouldn't meet with. Mahmoud Ahmadinejad? Yes. The Taliban? Yes. Hezbollah? Yes. The Dalai Lama? No. Why? Well, only because the U.S. owes China something like $3 trillion. Case closed. China's the boss now. And we have to get used to the hegemony of our neighbor China, just like we had to get used to the hegemony of the United States. And so recently, this is the payoff. The Vanuatu government, over much local protest, issued fishing licenses to 17 Chinese commercial trawlers that will be given free rein to fish the fabulously bountiful reefs and adjacent waters. The sheer tonnage that one of these trawlers can carry would stagger you. And there are 17 of them coming to this tiny country. And given the growing strata of influential Chinese business people in Vanuatu, some say this is only the beginning. I know the Chinese, with their growing population, have to get their fish somewhere to feed the new superpower's growing, ravening maw. But, their record on environmental sustainable practices has not, shall we say, been brilliant. And what has been enough, and more than enough, for the Nevans will, you can bet, never be enough for the appetite of a growing hyperpower, 1.5 billion of whom want to live just like you do.